Welcome, guys. Today we're talking about business finance and speaking specifically about understanding cash flow forecasts. Let's get right into it. Let's start at the beginning and look at the definition for cash flow forecast. That's always a good place to start. And so the cash flow forecast is really a statement outlining all the incoming cash items into a business compared against all the outgoing cash items. This is very important because ultimately what you end up with is the net cash inflow or outflow of the business that gives a strong indication to management as to whether or not they're in a position to meet their obligations as they're falling due, and specifically within a certain time frame. This could be a day, this could be for a week, this could be for a month, or this could be for a year. Let's dig a little deeper. At this stage, when we say dig deeper, we really mean dig deeper into these cash items. Bear in mind that companies do earn revenues from the sale of its products and services. Good percentage of these sales are incoming cash coming into the business. So when we talk about cash, we're talking about revenues predominantly, and revenues being earned by the company in the form of cash. But bear in mind that companies, and many companies, do have additional inflows that may come from a bank loan, for argument's sake, or inflows that may come from the capital injection from a new and incoming investor. The incoming funds may be from a sponsorship agreement. So many varied forms of inflows in the business, and what we want to do is to ensure that we are capturing everything and representing an accurate picture of what those incoming funds are. The important thing to also recognize is that when we say cash, we're talking about raw cash, or physical cash coming into the business, or it could be checks. We do agree that most of those checks are clearing in a few days, right? So yes, they are part of our cash and should also be impacting on the cash flow. We're also talking about receiving a direct deposit to our bank account or a bank transfer. All of those items are affecting the company's business and cash position in the short run and should be taken into consideration. On the outgoing side or outflow side, we're really talking about expenditures that you and I, I'm sure, know all too well about. We're talking about the salaries that we're paying to our staff members. We're talking about utility bills such as light, water. We're talking about additional outlays for inventory, for acquiring additional fixed assets. All of these are important and they're affecting the business and its cash position in the immediate term and should be taken into consideration. And just as we said on the incoming side, when we talk about cash, we're really talking about raw cash, physical cash going out of the business. And similarly, when the company or the business cuts a check, those have also to be taken into consideration as they are affecting the company's cash position in the immediate term. We're also talking about any bank transfer out of the company's bank account. Again, that's raw cash that's impacting on the company's cash position and should be taken into consideration. Let's talk a little bit more about the cash flow forecast. Who really is interested in the cash flow? I always joke and say to my staff that we all should be interested in the cash flow. Why? Because if the company is not meeting its obligations in the immediate term, it simply means that very soon our salaries will be impacted and likely impacted in a negative way. It's really incumbent on all of us to ensure that the company is managing its cash and taking the best of care to ensure that reserves are there and that they are growing and that they are available to meet the company's obligations as they are falling due. In all seriousness though, you will know that who's really interested in the cash flow depends on the company and the kind of organization, how they are structured. But wherever you find a treasury manager in employ, you will know that that person is very involved and very interested in the cash flow. In fact, they're the ones who would probably be doing or be responsible for doing the cash flow. Another person who would probably be very interested and very integral is the operations manager, especially if that operations manager is overseeing the payables function. They would want to ensure that cash is on hand or funds are on hand to make payments as they're becoming due. Another person would be very interested in the financial controller. The financial controller is maybe involved at a higher level and is responsible for ensuring that there's adequate cash for significant investments. The company may be thinking of expanding into new areas. The financial controller would be responsible for those things and would want to ensure that the cash is being managed properly and that cash is available to take on these major items. The marketing manager is also very keen and should be very keen on how the cash flow is being managed, because again, they're out there selling and making deals for ads and so on. They would want to ensure that those commitments can be backed at the right time. The chief executive officer is another individual, and at a very high level, who would be interested in the cash flow, and especially interested because he will know that in cash there is strength. He would want to ensure that the company in the short run is meeting its objectives, but also that over time that the resources, that the surpluses are growing, and that he will know that the more cash he has, the stronger the company will be. The board is also very interested in the cash flow. They may not necessarily be involved in a day-to-day or on a week-to-week, but certainly at the end of the month when they're having a meeting or the end of a quarter, they would want to know that the company continues to meet its obligations and that the surpluses are growing and that the financial strength of the business is improving. A good indicator of that strength and growth has to do with how much cash you're accumulating. All right, so there you have it. Those are the people typically who would be interested in the cash flow. Not limited to those, obviously, and as I said, we all should be. But generally speaking, the treasury manager, the operations manager, the financial controller, or the accountant, the marketing manager, the chief executive officer, and the board, those are the people who are keen and are very engaged in the process on a day-to-day basis. So who prepares the cash flow forecast? I did mention earlier that the treasury manager, as long as he's in employ, he or she, that person would be more than likely be responsible for preparing the cash flow, or the treasury officer for that matter. It all depends on the level of skill and scope that is involved or required. At another level or in another situation, the operations manager or the operations officer may be charged with preparing the cash flow forecast. Again, this all depends on how the organization is structured and the level of skill that the operations manager has or the operations officer. Depending on the level, those team members could be asked to do the cash flow. In another setting, the financial controller or the accountant may be responsible for preparing the cash flow forecast. And in a sense, when you think about it, and if you understand a little bit about the function or the financial controller or the accountant, in many instances, those team members are in the best position to understand all the transactions, all the flows in and out of the business. And so the preparation of the forecast is probably a better fit and a more natural fit for them. But it's not a must, it's not a done deal. Again, it all depends on how these companies are structured and what is required on a day-to-day basis or a periodic basis in preparing these cash flows. What is the importance of the cash flow forecast, you ask? Well, the cash flow forecast is extremely important. It outlines the incoming cash items into a business and compares it against all the outgoing cash items. That gives you a very interesting result. That result is your net cash inflow or outflow per period into the business. And it's a very strong indicator as to whether or not this business or your business is able to cover its obligations as they are falling due. And if you're not able to cover those obligations, it simply means that the business is becoming illiquid or is illiquid, or that the business is insolvent. And this may be maybe your first step or a step towards bankruptcy and closing the entire business. The beauty about the cash flow forecast is that with adequate timing, with adequate planning, what you can do if you foresee that there are gaps in the cash flow forecast, meaning that there are months when you're underwater or you're not able to cover those obligations, it simply means that you have enough lead time to make alternate arrangements. You can go to the bank and arrange a bank loan. You probably could pull down on some of your savings. You could invite another investor to join you in the ventureship and to inject capital so that you can improve your liquidity. You can arrange a sale. You can do some inventory factoring, a number of options. But the key thing is in preparing and managing this cash flow forecast, which will give the business a good enough tool to manage its cash affairs on a day-to-day, week-to-week, and month-to-month, or even a year-to-year basis. All right, so there you have it, a little bit or a little taste of what the cash flow forecast is all about. Join us soon again when we touch on another interesting topic under the heading Business Finance. See you then.